I got you, Saul. Middle Eastern
How's
religion.
it going?
Oh man, what happened? You guys were having such a good conversation, and he just ended the live post. I mean, in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Like, he didn't shut it down. I think TikTok ended the live.
He
Like, it
didn't.
just ended. It just shut it down. I don't know why.
His body language didn't look like he was about to end it, but it just.
No, no, no. I don't think he did that at all. It just said the live was shut down and it just cut everything out. So I think it was a TikTok thing. So,
That is.
but obviously you were listening. So you heard how much of the conversation did you hear?
I was like the last 10 minutes, so probably not very much. I mean, just
Oh, okay.
the going around in circles about what science means and stuff, and
What was interesting in the conversation, yeah, I was like, basically, you're looking for proof, but I think the type of proof that science is providing doesn't equate to what the spiritual side of things are. He's like, what, really? Well, what is there? So I gave some suggestions, some very specific books with guys who were discussing spiritual science. One of them was Charles Haanel and the Master Key System. So he looked it up. He's like, oh, well, it said science here. I said, yes, it's talking about spiritual science, not the science that is done in laboratories. And he's like, okay. And there were I said, but there are other professionals out there that are a part of the medical science field that are
mm,
also showing the relationship directly. And they've written books about that relationship and the effects of the spiritual science in coordination with our traditional science. And then those were the books that I was sharing. It was the um, Genie in Our Genes and the Biology of Belief. And
hmm
he's like, oh, okay. It was different, I think, for him because he's definitely more accustomed to speaking with Christians and
mm,
going over the claims that are made within um, their Bible. So
right.
this was something that was different for him.
There are there are scientific disciplines that there's so many actually, but like the human energy field has been highly studied and scientifically proven to one exist, and also to be able to demonstrate the capabilities of it, but both through um, like cause and effect, like sort of anecdotally, but also through scientific measurement. Like we can measure, we can photograph the energy field, and we can photograph intentionality and how it affects it. It affects the. I mean, just just the idea of observation being the affecting atoms. Like
Hmm.
that. Just the attention on the experiment affects the experiment. If that isn't a demonstration of spiritual science, I mean, you're kidding yourself. Like,
Yeah, no, yeah, I get it. So you're talking about like the observation effect that happens
yeah,
within quantum physics and
like,
stuff. Yeah, there's definitely. So my understanding is that that is not the same thing that is being attributed to attention or consciousness. What that means is just that from a quantum, when they're actually making the observation, they're throwing a photon at it, a piece of light,
hmm
so that they can
hmm
actually see what's going on or have some impact, or something else, or another type of radiation in order to see. And when doing that, then that has an effect on the quantum state of things. But people are like, oh well, what about the consciousness? It has an impact. So that specific one does not. But what I did find is an experiment that was done within the last few years. I think it was 2018, and it is a peer-reviewed science around how the consciousness is recorded and has an impact on a quantum state of a large quantum state, not just a small, but something that is what we would consider large, like a macro scale. And
hmm
that was recorded and it's done, and I have that research. So
Oh.
yes, it's there.
Well, it
I've
was
been taking
frustrating
your
because he was so caught up in the labels of words that he wasn't able to actually allow the conversation to get beyond these labels that only mean anything because we've all decided what they mean. We don't, it's not like a concrete thing. A word only has meaning based on the consensus of people using the word. So instead of focusing on the word, let's focus on the consensus of what's actually being talked about.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's kind of
He
frustrating.
It was. I was trying to steer the conversation to to the core of what began the conversation, which is you're making a claim that there has been no evidence in regards to spiritual realities, and that is not the case. And if you're willing to actually use the tools necessary in order to see that evidence, then they're available to you. That's
Mm,
something, and if you don't, then you can't make, oh, well, yeah, you've given me uh, a telescope instead of my microscope, and you've told me to point it in this direction, but I'm not going to look. Okay, great. Don't make the claim then that there's no evidence for a planet. You're not looking. You're not
right.
you're not willing to look. So let's take it from a different perspective. The thing is, dude, so the Book of Owaspi, I was I that's it's insane, the detail, the
Yeah.
absolute what I'm doing today. So there's this guy, his name on TikTok is Wings Chapter. He does research as part of his work. And we are going to be speaking today about the type of research methodologies that I can use and in order to I'm pulling together like the Book of Owaspi is one of the first things I'm looking to do. One, based on consciousness. There's a lot of
Hmm.
peer-reviewed science based on consciousness. And the second,
Hmm.
um, the cosmology and quantum physics. And I'm going to use the Book of Owaspi as a reference to say, look, we have this is it's published at this time. We had this much knowledge about cosmology, and this is literally what's being said, and it's accurate. Look at what it's talking. This is the science, and compare it to the science that we've made from the Book of Owaspi to Blavatsky to a few others that are very specific, and
Hmm.
then see and combine that as with the research and say this is knowledge that we've had, and this is not to be it can't you can ignore it, but it is valid. And that
Hmm.
book and then I need others. I have been making friends with physicists. I would like for them to go through some of the things that the Book of Owaspi is speaking about, because I think they would be able to decipher it in a way that in a conventional science way that I couldn't
Hmm.
because I don't have the knowledge, but I think they can. And so that book, the science in that book is on another level scary because it's so
Yeah.
specific and precise and
Hmm.
accurate that I'm like, okay, I don't know. It doesn't even it, I just don't even know what to say. Like I don't know why it's not even more known. I don't see
I
how it's
tried.
been hidden.
So I haven't really been on TikTok for like a month and can't really explain why. I just sort of felt like I wasn't into it anymore. But before that, I had a whole new background and a whole new sort of strategy of trying to here I'll share basically trying to recruit people to where is it? Oh, here it is. Trying to find people who are astrophysics, physicists, AI programmers, anybody with science or math training to review
Oh,
the Book of Cosmogony. And
yeah, yeah. Oh my
I,
God. So you're already on that. Yes.
I mean, I did it a few times, and I didn't. I got some people that were kind of interested, but never got anybody to actually follow through. And in my profile, I have a link to just that one book out of Owaspi, the Cosmogony book, so that anybody could just click on it and download the PDF, and it would be available to them. But it all it's going to take, Saul, is just one dude with a ton of qualifications to get a hold of it and understand it. And they're going to understand the significance of it in a way that can be articulated that we can't articulate. All we can do is stand back with our mouths open, like what? So
Right.
yeah, that's awesome that
Oh,
you're
oh,
working
you
with
know
people.
what? So you just okay. So this guy just came in here. His name is Vince. He he introduced me to this. What's the name, Vince? What's the name of that project? It's a project by a group of scientists who are the people in this group are the type of people that you would want to view the book of cosmogony.
Mm,
Those are the type, and I'm trying. I have the name. I have it written down, and I will share. Maybe yeah, that's a good idea. I want to get. I'm gonna send them a letter. I'm gonna write to them and say, hey, so
okay.
here's this information. I'm curious to see what you would think. Donald Hoffman. So Donald Hoffman, is he one of the leaders for the John Hank? No, no, no. It was the group that you introduced me to. They do the science and they do the YouTube videos for like mind, consciousness. Um, I forgot what's the name of the group of scientists that work together in order to discuss those things. I think that's the group, and he knows Vince. He posts a lot of content in regards to this type of thing. I'm not sure if you. Yes, the Essentia Foundation. Exactly. Yes, yes,
Huh.
yes. Um, the Essentia Foundation. This group is a group of scientists who do this type of work, and they do a lot of a really good work. And so I think I would love to have their thoughts around the Book of Owaspi,
Yeah.
and that would be really
Well,
amazing.
what I'm trying to find is exactly what you're trying to do, but I want somebody who can grasp it, but also has the capability of like generating a computer model based upon the information so that it's interactable. So in OWASP, it has these large time cycles and diagrams of the solar system, and it'd be like 3,000 chunks, a snapshot, but they're a snapshot 3,000 years and 3,000 years. It'd be nice to be able to have it all together so you can like fast forward through the and have like an actual model so you can start inputting things like it describes the force of the moon and the earth and the sun and the earth in ways that we don't talk about in ways that we don't have a model for, and we need to have some kind of foundation so we can start inputting information and asking questions. So if this is the model from OWASP, let's ask it a question from conventional science and see what the model produces from this other from OWASP model. You know?
Yes, exactly. That would be a good idea. I think, yeah, yeah, that would be really cool. I think, oh man, all these thoughts are coming to my mind. So the model that you're talking about, there are scientists where their job is to do modeling. And, they'll do,
Yeah.
and doing a model for that, I think it would really expose the knowledge contained in that book and in the books, within. I think it would really help people to better visualize and see, understand what is being said and how it's being, conveyed. That would be
There
great.
there's this one aspect that I have been struggling to sort of understand if it's accurate or here's my notes actually. If Okay, so conventionally the solar system is the sun and the planets orbiting the sun, and of course the sun is also moving forward. And so, okay. So in my head, there's three models that it could look like. Um, this is the basic model that we are familiar with, right? The sun is
Yep.
moving. orbiting around the Milky Way and the planets are orbiting around the sun, right?
Yeah.
But in a waspy, okay, so because of the motion sort of going sideways on the page, I'm gonna label the orbit around the sun as going um, sort of in front of the sun and behind the sun, right? Because
Right.
okay. So the next way to describe it is if the sun is not going forwards but going up, sort of
Uh-huh.
going up, and the planets are still orbiting around the sun, but instead of going in front and behind the sun, it's more of going around the side of the sun because of the
Oh,
orientation of motion.
uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So very
But
much like a what's it called? Like a funnel, but there's like a spiral.
this is how Owaspy describes it,
Mm-hmm.
the very bottom.
Yeah. Okay. There, have
But
you
in
seen the
this,
models? Have you seen that before? There's an animation that shows that very depiction.
I have seen that, but I believe the planets are still going around the sun in some orientation or another. But in a waspy, I'm really trying because they're pin drawings on paper, so they're not really motion dynamic. You have to imagine that part. It looks like the planets are trailing the sun, and they're still doing this arcing motion, but it's described as a snake, kind of like a spiral.
Uh-huh.
So from what we can observe, without the clutter of the school system sort of biasing us, what can we observe from our point of view, the motion of the where we're at in the sun? Could we really tell the difference if we're going around the sun or if we're just spiraling behind it? Would we be able to tell the difference?
Good question.
Yeah, and it's really got me puzzled because I don't know if there really would be a. It's like it's okay. When I was studying flat Earth, there was a problem of perspective. If you're being orbited, you can't really tell if you're orbiting or being orbited because it looks exactly the same from a strictly personal perspective of an observer, without any scientific instruments. From just a perspective issue, you can't tell if the thing is going around you or if you're going around it.
Okay.
And a
Okay.
waspy describes it as a vortex funnel, so it's trailing the sun. You still have the orbit motion, and depending on the angle of where you're at in relationship to the sun, you still get the sort of the change in angular perspective, but the actual concept is totally different. And that's where we need like a computer to generate this model. And I have seen what you're talking about, that animation where it talks about the moon going around the earth and the earth going around the sun going, it compounds all these motions, and
Right.
we're actually traveling at like a bazillion miles an hour, ultimately.
Right.
It's really
Right.
fascinating.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying. Like the model that's described is a bit different. It's not like this orbiting around the sun, but like you're saying that we're trailing
Hmm.
behind, but we're still doing it's in an elliptic format that's
Yeah.
like a corkscrew ellipse. And so
Hmm.
it appears as though, it's like we're going round, but it's not, but we're not. And how to depict that. Um,
Hmm.
Three southern continents roughly 120 degrees apart, sky orbiting Southern Cross equal opposite North Pole. Three southern continents. Choose a model that does not fail on the least inspection. Three southern
Well, see, the thing
continents.
is,
I don't know what
we
that
can make
means.
observations. Science, this sort of speaks to what you were talking about with the other guy. Science can make observations, and the observations can describe things that are predictable, but science does a really poor job at just at actually understanding the mechanisms behind the observation. So yeah, we can make observations and describe them and duplicate them based upon the the scientific process, but the mechanism behind it is something that science fails at. I think there's several reasons. One of them is that the people who actually know the truth are gatekeeping it and not giving us all of the truth. And so the models we have are edited and curated so that they're mostly correct. But um, if we are trailing the sun instead of orbiting the sun, they're keeping that from us, and they have a reason for it.
Hmm. Why would they keep an orbital trajectory out of the knowledge of the majority?
It's so that they all. I don't know the actual reason, but the general reason is the more that they can control our knowledge, the more they can control us. It's like, why did they fake the moon landing? There's evidence. There's evidence that we actually have gone to the moon and that we actually might actually have bases on the moon, and there's video evidence for that. But the official moon landing public videotape, the public stuff that they have us all eating out of, that's all fake. That's demonstrably fake. I mean, it's absolute garbage. But there is real evidence that we have been to the moon. So why would they present fake information to us when we are, have military bases on the moon or whatever? I don't know what the truth is. Nobody knows what the truth is, but there's
Oh, interesting.
evidence.
Are you referring to Richard Hoagland?
Um, he's somebody, yeah, he's somebody I'm very familiar with, and there's another one, John Lear, but there's
Oh,
stuff coming out. Oh,
John Greer.
maybe
Yeah,
that's it.
I know. Okay,
Um,
so you're saying that they have, so this is what I haven't, there's a lot of information that gets flown around. Have you heard from a credible source that there are bases on the moon?
well, I mean, if they were credible sources, they wouldn't be saying it. Because who gives the credibility? Who issues the credentials? Right? The people creating the official narrative. And if you go against it, then they take away your credentials. So the second let's just say that we all assumed that we had bases on the moon, but weren't allowed to talk about it. We can go on the news, we can write books and publish and peer review as long as we don't reveal the truth. The second we reveal the truth, we lose our credibility. So when you ask if there's credible sources, that's already built into the system that there's not going to be any credible sources.
I see. So, do you believe the sources that you've heard that there are bases on the moon?
It's really difficult to discern because there are so many it's there's so much information out there. You have the official narrative, and then you have so many different like whistleblowers and video and eyewitness, and all of it is you don't know if it's if it's misinformation on purpose done by the establishment to confuse us, or if it's really truly a whistleblower trying to inform us. It's like if there's one moon and one reality, why are there so many narratives around it? You know? Why are there so many conflicting stories? There has to be some element of truth in amidst all of the contradictory stories. But what is the actual real essence of the truth? I have no idea. I just know the official story I believe is false.
And the official story being that in 1969, Buzz Aldrin and the other two guys went to the moon.
Yeah, yeah, I believe that is 100% false. And I used to think that because I was studying flat Earth and that whole thing. Now I think it's false because I believe I believe that I believe that the people running the show are doing things behind the scene that they don't want us to be aware of. So they're giving us stories to fight over. Was the moon landing faked or was it real? That's a story that they gave us that we could fight over as a distraction from the truth. What's the truth? I don't know what the truth is, but I can recognize the distraction.
Interesting.
I mean, I think it's the same thing with what we're talking about with Owaspy, the orbit around the sun, or is it trailing? It's like how do we actually know the truth? We either have to believe what's been told to us through the establishment, or we have to start from the ground zero and come up with our own models and figure out what we can verifiably know.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Uh, it is difficult to discern because there's so much information, so many different conflicting narratives, and
I
it's hard.
I've stopped saying I know anything.
I I get it. Yeah. I can understand why because it's so difficult to say here's absolute knowledge. Here's something that's for sure. I've started to go, I believe in absolutes. And I believe that absolutes are premised and can be shared through principles. And a principle, once a person encounters a principle, there's there is a there is a not camaraderie, but there's an agreement, there's a recognition. Yep, this is true. And uh, so I realize that for me, the path would be to say, okay, where is the principle in whatever category we're dealing with? And once that
Hmm.
principle has been identified, there is a unity that happens, a union that comes about because it's not about the other person is not disproven or now wrong, but now there is an exposure of all of the connecting pieces to what it is that they do have right. And that is also something that principle does. So I
Hmm.
look at that and I'm like, okay, I am interested. I had a really interesting conversation last week, and it was with the atheists. And the atheists, it was in a philosophy type of talk, uh, TikTok live, and they were this Christians were coming up and they started, eviscerating them and all this stuff. They open up another live, to continue the discussion. I joined in and I was like, okay, look, ultimately, I understand that you guys are against the narrative, but you're not against the principles here. And the
Right.
principles ultimately is that there are, the scientific principles. Those things, those principles, that's what spiritualists term to be the source, God, et cetera, et cetera. And they were very much they received it, okay,
Hmm.
because they couldn't go against it. And when I say received it, I mean specifics like, well, we have consciousness, right? Yeah, you and I have consciousness. Great. Which means that the universe certainly is conscious. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's a fallacy. Oh, no, no. I said, well, hey, hold on. You are the universe in form, are you not? Well, yeah, okay, great. And you have consciousness. Well, yeah, great, which means that consciousness is a property of the universe, which is being expressed as you and me, etc. Well, and they agreed. They tacitly were like, okay, yes, because obviously if that is a component that we believe in,
Yeah.
obviously it came from the universe, the principle of that energy and all that. Okay, fine. They were okay with that and it got us moving forward. So I was like, okay, if we can do that with other things, then print just identify, well, what's the principle in this?
Hmm.
then it exposes everything else. When it comes to like the moon landings and the governments and things like that, so the principles that underlie those things are secret. And they're secret not be they're secret for three main reasons. One is because the it's a secret because number one, there's a agreement
Hmm.
between us all. Like we all, I think we had this before. Our discussion was like, you don't jump onto the stage in the middle of the play and start, disrupting it. Oh, this guy, his real name is John. It's, you're breaking all the characters, you're breaking the whole thing. That's number
Right.
one, the first thing. Number two is that the system that is operating, that operates on these principles, in order for those things to be known or exposed, shared, I should say, requires cost. It requires a cost. And my mistake when I thought, oh, I want to know. And if I know, then, you could share it with people. It doesn't, knowledge can never be shared, is something I've learned. Information can be shared, but knowledge can never be shared because knowledge is something that is based on experience,
Yeah.
right? You're a parent. You know what it is to be a parent.
Hmm.
If a person has never had a kid and doesn't know what it is to have their own child, to raise a child, you can have all the informational books in the world. That's not going to help you to
Yeah.
know what that is. So that it can never be discussed like that. You have to know. And the third is because of the operation of the system itself. And I've
Hmm.
learned, oh, when it comes to certain things, I did get a piece of knowledge that exposed to me, oh, this is what's happening. And what that meant was it changed my perspective between what was good and bad, between the good guys, the bad guys, and things became much more gray.
Hmm.
And I have a healthy respect for the things that are hidden and why. I can say that.
So I agree with you. Okay, I agree with you that principles are the foundation for agreement, for communication, because the labels and the sort of the doctrine behind the labels are are come in different packages. So yeah, if you can strip all that away and talk about the principles, then you have a much better foundation for a conversation. Here's a principle. It doesn't point to truth, but it does point to the need to seek for truth. When you have sort of a platform that is polarizing, and there only appears to be two sides, and both sides are convinced that they're right, other side's wrong. And why? Is because it's just the way it is. When you have two sides fighting, and there isn't an obvious third side in the fight, it's because it's a distraction. And the real truth is going to be in that third option. So the assignment is to go out and find whatever is in that third option. So yeah, that's a principle I learned a long time ago. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. If you have two sides, like science and like you were talking to that one guy, science and the physical sciences, and then the spiritual sciences, or
Consciousness. Yeah.
Democrat or Republican, or creation versus evolution, or it can go any direction. Two sides that are promoting themselves as being superior to the other side. There is going to be a third option, and the truth will be in the third option, and it will compose bits of both sides. Both sides have truth. The third option is one bringing together the truths from both sides and also adding to it to make a more complete picture.
Buddha calls that the middle
Absolutely,
way.
precisely.
What's up, Brian?
Hey, yeah, Buddha calls that
Yes, the middle way.
the middle. Buddha calls that the middle way, and that's why it's a sort of a perennial syncretism of a dualistic argument. I mean, you try to create this kind of perennialism between that there's truth in both sides, and then kind of create this syncretic view that where both sides are kind of inclusive in that middle way. Then that's where you can find truth. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's wisdom there.
In order to start that, you have to go back to what Saul was saying is you have to give up the labels and go back to the principles because the truth will be
Hmm.
found in the principles.
Hmm.
I think that's where that's truly the challenge that I have set out at this point with the discussions that I have. I gather a lot of different points of views, understanding, okay, cool. And then I'm looking to dive into, okay, then where's the principle here? And
Hmm.
then from that point, I see, there's opportunity for a connection to bridge, to serve as a bridge between these seemingly disparate sides, I think
Yeah,
is really, really important.
it is important. I just don't see how we can progress as humanity until we're all what we get to that tipping point where the majority of humanity is willing to engage in what we're engaging in. At that point, then we can sort of have like a sigh of relief, like, oh, there is hope for us. But until that happens, it's like people need to loosen their grip on whatever dogma that they have, because it's not the most important thing in the world. It's actually some of the least important things in the world. The dogma, the principle, is the most important thing. The
Yeah.
That is
dogma,
the
If
thing.
everybody approached everything with sort of a Socratic constant questioning of their view and lived in a state where they realize that learning is a never ending process, you would never like find yourself stuck in a in a in a bipolar kind of
hmm
system where you're constantly creating an opposition. And if you kind of live in that Socratic space, then what happens is that you're willing to kind of find that middle way and willing to look at things and question things in such a way that you'll always be questioning. Um, and it sort of helps the truth narrow itself down over time. And it actually, after a while, you kind of get to this whole thing, uh, that um, the more you realize, more you think you know, the more you realize you know nothing at all. Con-
Yeah,
Confucius,
yeah,
Confucius
yes.
say, the more you think you know, the more you realize you know nothing at all.
yeah,
Right. That's true. Because it just expands, it just highlights the limitation of
Right.
my own mind. Like, oh wow, there's no me that could ever be uh, expansive enough to even begin
Mm.
with knowledge. It's just ridiculous. So there's a humility that steps into place there, or at least there should be, and say, okay,
And when you do that, you start to realize that you're sort of riding the wave of an infinite stream of consciousness. Because if you're constantly in this Socratic questioning, you're basically kind of going with the flow and allowing the knowledge to carry you through the process. And since you will always be in this Socratic place of questioning, you'll be riding that wave of consciousness probably your whole entire life, and beyond, right? And what that proves to me is that proves to me that there is a literal infinite stream of consciousness, and that goes back to where consciousness derives from. Is it part of the is it part of the whole entire experience, both spiritual and physical, so on and so forth.
There's a very real fear that is present when things like the truth, the middle way, and principles are seriously investigated and shared. It was literally
Mm.
so that it was like an hour ago. I was on a live, I was having a conversation, just stopped. It ended. It ended, and it wasn't the host who ended it. The Literally, it was what, Friday or last Friday or something like that. There was a conversation I was having with this guy that was very. I was He was very much trying to warn about the powers that be and their infiltration into education and how that was detrimental and how they were utilizing that. I, I was, I, s- I spoke to him and I said, my point was to say, I don't think you understand what it is that you're really trying, what you're doing, what you're getting into, I understand what you're trying to do, but I don't really think you understand the things. He's like, no, I understand. I have a PhD and da 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 da. I'm doing this, and you have to understand there's a sickness of society. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not a broken system. It's working just fine. The system is intended to be just like it is. And he was like, no, you don't understand. I said, no, no, you don't understand. I truly am not speaking from speculation. I mean that seriously. You really should be cautious. He's like, no, there's no need to because people need to understand this and that. Boom. The live ended and he was suspended for a week for
Oh
nothing. I
wow.
mean, literally, he said nothing. He was not incendiary in any way, shape, or form. It was a very just normal conversation, and it was done. I was like, wow.
Hmm.
This there's TikTok is because it's algorithmic. There's no question. I know that if I know that a specific course of conversation that's leading somewhere will quickly be stopped.
Yeah.
Depending on the nature of that conversation, it will cease, and that's not a mistake. So, I
Saul,
mean, I'm saying that in regards to what you're talking about. Yeah, there
Saul,
are certain
Saul, I was just
truths that are being obscured.
Yeah.
hey Saul or Brian, were either of you guys in the live yesterday when I was talking to Cease?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay, never mind. Because we got to the bottom, like, because you've talked to Cease before, Saul, and I was actually going to ask you why you had a problem with him because I was curious what your history was with him, but we can get to that later. But yeah, we really got. He said that by the end of the conversation, he said that he was 90% in my favor with his understanding of reality. He's like, but he just wouldn't take that extra little leap. So he's very close. And I'm
Oh
just
yeah, no,
curious. Yeah.
Cease is we're friends. We're friends.
Hmm.
We like jab at each other because we've had many conversations and yeah, he's really smart and he definitely will walk that line, but he just will not cross it.
He won't take that final leap of faith, right? He just won't because he's so conditioned. But he will. I think he'll come around eventually.
I think Cease was.
Yeah.
I was in a room with Cease. Saul wasn't in the room, and Cease jokingly said Saul was several syllable Saul.
Word
He
salad
said
all.
he uses long words, so he called him several syllable Saul.
Several
And
syllables
I
all.
laughed. I thought that was the most hilarious because that is so true.
It is. It is. All right, Cease. I'm coming for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a because he's well, Brian and I so this guy, he's a philosopher guy. Brian and I, we had like an hour and a half conversation with him about the physical versus non-physical. And
Okay.
dude, I thought we were very, very close because he did also say he's like, well, I don't know, but I will definitely look into it a little bit more. And, we left it at that. So he's
Yeah.
very, yeah, I think he's amenable.
I
Hmm.
agree.
Hey, Brian, I
Mhm.
had a question for you.
Sure.
Um, because yeah, I mean, everybody here is done more research than me on pretty much everything else. But Saul and I were talking about the Book of Owaspy, which I'm guessing you haven't read. But the question isn't really about Owaspy. The question is, in all of your research, because we were talking about how our observations of reality, right? And we're talking about the solar system as just an example. Um, how the planets are described to move around the sun and the sun is moving this direction. How all of those
Hmm.
observations can be observed and described, but the actual reality of the emotion may be different than our conclusions. Like for example, um, if you're in a white environment with no environmental context, and you're um, seeing a ball going around you, you could have
Hmm.
two conclusions: one, that the ball is going around you, or that you're going around the
We're
ball.
going around the ball, right?
Right. So in all of your research in ancient texts and everything you know about, is there a version of the universe that utilizes the observations we have, but describe different reality that still fits with our observations, but the actual motion or the actual action, the actual impetus of what's going on is different than what we're told in the mainstream that you find to be compelling?
Um, in the long term, in the simplest form, no. And I'll tell you, I think the reason why is because all views coming from an earthly realm are anthropomorphic. So they're coming from the view of where we are. And that's normal in normal human behavior. So it seems to be repeated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, as science has gotten, we've realized that we don't really. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the the new spiral rotation ideology of our solar system as it relates to the arm of the universe. So, have you seen how there's this new spiral model
Mm-hmm.
of how the solar system functions, right? But that's because we've kind of gotten past our own anthropomorphic view. The farther you go back in time, we view everything from ourselves.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's why. Now, not to say that there aren't some things that have some aspects to it that kind of take it out of the self. I will tell you, um, uh, I if you look up on YouTube, um, Isaac Luria, Luria, his poem "The Tree of Life." Isaac Luria was an early Kabbalist. And this poem, The Tree of Life, talks about the creation, about a Kabbalistic view of the creation of the universe.
Uh-huh.
And Kabbalah.info puts out a video that they kind of did a sort of a computer visualization of Isaac Luria's poem, how he was, and it's very interesting how that. So if you look that up, Kabbalah.info, Isaac Luria, Tree of Life. Put those in the YouTube search engine. You will find a very interesting video about the whole creation of the universe from a
Okay.
Kabbalistic perspective, and it's very interesting. However, I don't think although I think that it definitely does not match the time that Luria was writing that in comparison to how people thought of creation at that time. He was unique.
Hmm.
I still think that the model still fits um, a kind of our first person perspective.
Huh.
So no, I don't. I think that that would be something that would have been a newer thing as far as ancient texts are concerned.
Interesting. Well, I'm
Can
definitely
I
gonna look at it.
can I ask you guys a quick question? Brian
Mhm.
and Saul, just a little bit off topic. When y'all are, do either of y'all drink alcohol or take any mind altering substances at all, or no?
I don't drink alcohol. As far as mind altering substances, um, I haven't done anything mind altering in quite a while. I'm not opposed to it. I've actually would be interested in going down to South America to utilize an ayahuasca retreat, but it's not something. I don't do anything like that very lightly. It's something that I have to do as a. It's not a party thing for me. It's a mind
Right, right.
expansion thing,
So
right?
no,
So
so you don't smoke cigarettes, you don't do
no,
THC or any of that stuff? Okay.
no.
I do
Okay. Saul, which one is it? The THC or the drinking or what?
both drinking and weed.
Okay. Just I was just curious if so I don't ever drink, but I used to occasionally dabble in that, and I was just curious, like understanding this information, does the THC help you or does it inhibit you?
No, it absolutely helps me. It does not inhibit me.
I
Hmm.
think my spiritual awakening happened because of an experience that I had in 1995. It was an LSD experience, and it changed. It not only did it change my spiritual concepts, but it changed my brain. I honestly do believe, because I was in college at the time, and I went from a student who was barely passing and having to do classes and having to test out of classes through testing to not having a problem having conceptualized issues. I had a form of like ADD prior to that, but I think it really fixed it. It also fixed a lot of my depression issues, which strangely enough, they're of course using that now to help with depression. And in 95, that wasn't very widely known because it wasn't something that they were able to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
THC did all those things for me back in the day. It changed. Like I'm a different person, I think, because of it.
so I
Yeah.
may end up being a smoker soon because I'm diabetic. I don't know if you know I'm diabetic, and I have mild neuropathy. But my neuropathy over as I get older has become a little bit more pronounced. And I found out that opioids actually strip the lining on your nerves, so it actually makes your neuropathy worse because it's stripping that like how a wire has a plastic coating. Your nerves have a coating of proteins, and I found out that one thing that actually helps with the pain, but also builds those proteins, is THC.
Oh, interesting.
And
Okay.
so, because I can get a medical card in my state, my doctors recommended that I get a medical card to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Saul, referring to that, the only thing I would say is that it does help you think differently, but sometimes when you don't do it for a long period of time, it also helps to think in a certain way. So like if you're
Hmm.
I guess if you want to talk to materialists, physicalists, and you want to be extremely technical and logical, and I feel like you need to have a sound, clear mind. But if you really want to talk about deep spirituality and talk about your experience, where you're feeling your experience, then I think the THC helps. I don't know if you've had that understanding or not.
In my experience, it affects me where it just simply it allows me to go to move linearly and laterally in my thinking
Interesting.
simultaneously. So I
Same.
can choose, but it doesn't inhibit where, you become all clouded or it's difficult. Not at all. It
Right.
actually accentuates that for me. So
It
when
just made me paranoid and want Funyuns.
So
Yeah,
I have a
Yeah, I
question.
used to have that. I don't have munchies or anything like that anymore either.
it
But I
can do
love it.
that.
I think it's my favorite treat. I just haven't had I haven't had the I haven't had that in some time, but
Yeah.
when I do, it's wonderful.
So
Yeah, I
I have
have
a
a,
question about
I have,
weed.
sometimes I'll have like a spiritual experience from that, especially when I haven't done it for like like a month or two. If I go, the first time I do it, I'll literally go into almost a spiritual experience. It's really wild.
Oh, really?
I,
What do you experience?
Oneness with existence. Yeah, there's no separation. Like it's more apparent. Like I already understand it at a fundamental level, but it just becomes, it's like a deepening of the understanding.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
oh, somebody found a waspy online. That's cool.
Yeah, he heard us talking earlier, and I was saying that was what we were referencing, the
Everything
waspy.
just becomes more vivid and alive, and you realize like that everything is God. I mean, I understand that already, but sometimes when you do that, it just becomes more of like an embodiment.
So I have a question about weed from a practical standpoint. So it's been probably 20 years since I smoked anything, any weed, and it was, some of it was a good experience. Most of it wasn't really that great. But now I would definitely be doing it for a purpose. But now I have this conflict where any of the sources I would be able to obtain, I don't trust. Um, it seems like all the strains have been so heavily changed and modified that it wouldn't it wouldn't be giving me the sort of more holistic benefits of smoking. Like I just like I would like to smoke, but it just seems like it would be nice to find like an old strain
Where are
that
you? Where you live? Where do you live?
Eastern Oregon.
Um,
Oh hell, don't they? I mean, don't they? Is it recreational up there?
I know, but all the things all the places to go get is basically government weed, you know?
if
It's
you
like
if you can find like AK-47, train wreck, some of the older strains, then yeah, I would agree. But yeah, some of the newer ones, they combine like four different strains into one, and it's like it's getting ridiculous. I agree with you.
so when we get our property all squared away and stuff, it's definitely something if we can find some seeds for old strain stuff, we want to grow it for topical and maybe like making making edibles. But at this point, it's too scary. Like it's not worth it. I would rather, just wait and do the whole ayahuasca ceremony and just have like
Yeah.
instead of an ongoing event.
Okay, that's our trip. Now we all just need to come together. We all go together. Like, yeah, just go down to yeah. This would be perfect.
Yeah, my wife and I are
I'm
both on board with that one.
I'm nervous about that. I see. I've never done any other type of mind altering substance except for that. So when I hear about ayahuasca, I'm like, oh, it sounds really intense. Is it scary?
It
Um,
can be, but the thing is, that's why you're supposed to kind of go to a place where you kind of have a babysitter and a guide
yeah.
who's sort of guiding the experience. So it's kind of like any hallucinogen in that regard. If you have a babysitter that's walking you through the experience, and you're told before that when you go to these retreats, you're kind of given them a set of meditations to kind of do prior to the experience to kind of set your mind up to kind of you know help you kind of guide yourself as well so that you don't have a bad experience, right? So that's, I mean, I've done the research, and I just haven't spent the money to get out. My mother lives in Mexico, and she lives in a place called Lake Chapala, and where she lives, I was going to do a kind of a double whammy and go visit mom, and then go do the ayahuasca. I figure I'll do the ayahuasca first rather than have to listen to my mom's kind of nagging tone, because I figured that her nagging tone would probably set up a really bad ayahuasca experience.
All right.
Yeah.
I think Saul, I think it's I think the first time it's like releasing trauma, stuff that
Hmm.
you don't even know that you have. It's like it's a pain that is extremely painful, but it feels good, like a it hurts so good kind of thing. You just got to go through it. Like I know my first experience is probably going to be horrible in a good way, and the second time will hopefully be like a better experience.
Hmm.
I would love to go down and do it myself. I've never done anything other than the green as well, so I would love to try that.
Wow.
So Vincent, this is my first time talking with you. It's nice to meet you. What kind of stuff do you normally chit chat about? Like, what's your
We're
um,
all kind of the same. Vincent, we all have Vincent, me, Saul, a few others. We all kind of follow each other.
yeah.
And notice we all came in the room right after each other. It's because we all it's because we follow each other around.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
cool.
I had a spiritual awakening about 10 years ago, when after I was a physicalist atheist, just like Cease, for about 10 years prior to that. And so, like, and I didn't even ask for my spiritual experience. I was just reading a Sam Harris book, which is one of my atheist, friends or whatever. And not friends, but one of the atheists. And I had a spiritual experience the first time I meditated, and I didn't expect it. I wasn't trying to have a spiritual experience, but it just happened. And ever since
Mm.
that time, I've been sort of researching whether or not I was a crazy person or not. And it turns out it was just Buddhism and Hinduism 101, that I
Mm.
was, and then I've been sort of studying consciousness ever since.
You had your
Okay, so
ego death and it scared you a little bit, didn't it, Vince? Didn't it?
It was, yeah, it was the most surreal experience. It scared me, but it was liberating, and a peace and love came over my body, and
Yeah.
it lasted for several weeks.
That's
So
cool.
that's awesome.
if you ever read Eckhart Tolle's book The Power of Now, he talks about
Mm-hmm.
how he had a spiritual experience, and he was stuck on a park bench in Germany for 2 years after his experience.
Yeah, yeah. Eckhart Tolle is one of my favorite authors.
He's
He's
great.
really good.
Yeah, he's great.
So I have a question for everybody. I'm reading this book. It's a series of 14. It's a volume of 14. It's the Sacred Books and Early Literature of the East. And this one that I'm reading now is number 9. It deals with India and Brahmanism.
Mm. That's right up
Mm,
my alley, Brahmanism.
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
here.
So, and the reason why I'm reading it is to sort of compare and contrast with what I'm learning about in the Book of Oahspe. And um, so the steps that is being taken to sort of strip yourself of all this superficiality is very, very, very similar to what is found in Oahspe, but it instead of reaching up, they're using metaphors of up, like of deities and sort of the source and like the all self and different things
Yeah.
like that. But one of the progressions that I was really jazzed about, and then it went from, and I don't have it memorized, but it was like a 7-step process of going closer to source, and then the next step after that was um, the all nothingness, which is a
Yeah.
huge contrast to what I find in a waspy because um, the all nothingness is found in a waspy, but it's found as a false doctrine. It's like it's like you discovering the creator and then realizing the creator doesn't exist or something like that. And all of this is happening inside of yourself with kind of metaphors of the external, but it's all pointing back to yourself. I'm kind of trying to figure out how to understand this, and it's difficult for me to sort of understand understand where the metaphor ends and like I don't know. It's very confusing to me trying to understand like the real truth of what the message is.
Do you remember what that last seventh step was called? Was it Vidamukta?
Shoot.
You
It was
you talk about mukti, or whatever, or
Vida
moksha,
Vida
or
Mukta,
moksha.
no, Vida Mukta, which is a seven. This is a 7-step, 7 steps to the Siddha within the Brahmanistic view, and Vida Mukta is the last one, I believe.
I don't know. I'm not underlining in this book because they were published in 1917, and so
You can't use
unfortunately,
pencils, you know.
The final stage of the final stage of enlightenment is called Turiya, TuryiA, which is unity of being.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to tell you all earlier. That's what I had. That's when I had that experience with meditation, and back 10 years ago. And I still have that to this day. Sometimes when I meditate, and sometimes when I take the green, it's not really up to me. It just happens, spontaneously. You just feel like you're one with existence. That's why some people, they take the green and then they feel like they're in love with everything. They just love everything, but nothing changed. Like your physical reality didn't change. It's just your perceptions of reality just were lessened. Like you got out of your own head. The THC goes in and it numbs some of the erratic thoughts that you have that are constantly bouncing around in your head, and it kind of settles those down a little bit so you can see reality for what it actually is.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it real quick.
I always consider the nothingness not an absence, but an abstraction. Something that is so undefined from our perspective
Hmm.
that the word that we would use would be a nothingness.
The void.
Um, but I don't think from that, from the spiritual perspective, that it's about there being an absence of all things in all ways, but more like an the
A
most
potentia,
transcendent of
a pot,
things.
a pot, a potentia, a place of potential, but not nothing is there. But what it, but because nothing is there, what it leaves is it leaves a void that is a potential for something to then become.
All potential,
Mm.
yeah, all potential. If you were to represent all potentiality, then it would look like a nothing because
If
it's not one thing or another, but it's
right,
all that could be.
if you're no thing in particular, then just by that very definition, you are everything.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it
Yeah.
I
was
mean,
Exupéry who said
please,
that
please
perfection
tell
is
me
not
you've read
something to be
Being in
added to.
Nothingness. Have you read Being in Nothingness? Okay,
No.
that's a good. But that's a book that you need to read. Is Being in Nothingness
Who
by
wrote it?
Okay.
Jean Paul Sartre.
Sartre. Oh, I like him. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
It
Yeah,
was
we've talked about Sartre, and we've talked about his wife too. That his wife has written some stuff.
Oh yeah,
Was
yeah,
that Sartre? Yeah.
Hmm. Yep.
Okay.
That's what it is.
All right then.
That's exactly what it is. It's not the absence of it's not the absence of everything. It's the no thing consciousness for which all things exist.
what's
Yeah,
his
it
name also
seems.
does a good job of that. Neil, oh, what's his name? His name is around the tip of my tongue, but he talks about returning to the nothingness that he always is. Um,
Yes.
Donald something. There's a very good quote. I'll send it. I'll find it again. But he speaks
That's
about
it.
that, and it's a great way of, I think, thinking about it. And also Saint Exupéry. He also says perfection is not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away.
Yes. Perfect. That's perfect. He's got it. 100%.
You talking about Donald Walsh, the
Yes,
one
yes,
who wrote
thank you.
Conversations with God?
Yes, yes, yes. Neil Donald Walsh. Yes.
Okay. I also recommend Ken Wilber.
I've heard of that guy.
Ken Wilber. What did he write?
Oh gosh, he's got a lot. He's got a lot of
Yeah,
material.
I've heard of that guy. Yeah.
Um,
Someone just referenced Wilbur to me. Was it you, Brian? Or was it?
mm, no, probably not, because I don't think I've talked. I think I talked with somebody about Ken Wilber the other day. He's wrote The Eyes of the Spirit. He's Shambhala Books. That's his publishing house. Um,
Ken Wilber.
so he's wrote a brief history of everything under Shambhala Books. Um, so yeah,
So
I'm
you
So
just
in
so
looking at
you're
my I'm just
saying
looking at my bookshelf
David
right now where I've got Wilbur books.
Walsh, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, David, you were saying that in the Book of Owaspi, the concept of reaching this nothingness was considered to be a false doctrine. What was the
Well,
context?
so I'm trying to articulate in my head. There is a concept of self-abnegation. So the way we grow closer to the Creator is to devoid ourself of ourself in a way that is like ego driven and selfish and self-centered, so that we can selflessly engage in the world, right? So in that sense, we are on a process of becoming nothing, as far as that side of ourselves goes. But it it feels it feels like in a waspy there is that side of emptying yourself of yourself, but it feels more of a building yourself up in a way that is, you're devoiding yourself of your ego. So you have the ego death, and the I think it's just a matter. I think they are saying the same thing, but so the concept of nothingness being sort of heresy in a waspy is when when the destination of going inside yourself and realizing that nothing is the destination, transferring that concept to the creator and realizing that the creator is also nothing, basically full of potential, basically nothing. So instead of being the all person, the all source, the all light, the heresy is that the creator is the all nothing, and sort of stripping the creator of personhood or personality or self motivation. That's the
Okay.
heresy. But
So can I speak on this from a Kabbalistic viewpoint? Okay.
yeah,
So in Kabbalah, there is a place in on the Tree of Life that's called Da'at. Da'at is this sort of bridge, and the best way I can describe it is: did you ever see? I'm using a movie, okay? Did you ever see the movie? I cannot remember which Indiana Jones it was, but he's having to cross this rift,
That was my
and
favorite scene.
he has to step out into what looks like there's nothing there. He has to step out, but the second
that
he
stone
steps
bridge.
out, there's this bridge there, and it just happens to just like appear under his foot once he steps out. He has to take this leap of faith, right? So Da'at is what's called the Sephirot that is no Sephirot. It is a place where you come to this place where you've rid yourself of the lower aspects of your ego, which are the lower seven bodies, the lower seven portions of the tree of Sephirot, of the tree of life. You cross Da'at and you cross into the upper triad, which is the beginning of your understanding of God's source, right? And how that happens is what it's almost immediate. It's like flipping a switch. It's like once you you have the ego death, and there's immediately this empty space of potentia. It's like you then turn around and you're no longer facing your lower selves. You're facing God source. And so then at that point, you're raising the vibration of what's called your ruach. Your ruach is the spiritual or consciousness self. And so you're immediately replacing it. Once you have the ego death, you're immediately prepared to replace it with a higher understanding of self through God, because you cannot know what God is or what source is until you know what yourself is or is not. in this case, right? You have to have the ego death before you can replace it with something. And that's what's happening when you cross da'at. And it is. It's literally like a switch. It's like someone immediately takes everything out of you because you've had the ego death, and when you turn around and look up at the higher triad, you're immediately replacing that potentia with something. Now, is there a point, or was there a point when God was nothingness? Yes, but that was at creation. That was not where we are now. That's the creation story of Kabbalah, is that at some point God realized his own nothingness, right? So it's kind of like God had his own ego death, and that ego death created creation. That was when God had its ego death. And once it had its ego death, it turned downward, and suddenly it expressed all of its beingness out into the universe. And that's when it had its own creation. But that doesn't apply anymore because that creation has already happened, and we haven't returned to source as of yet. So that doesn't that like God's source ego death doesn't apply to the mechanism that we're functioning through. Right. Only our ego death applies in this case.
Interesting. It's interesting because the principles, exactly what Saul was talking about at the very beginning, line up exactly. In Owaspy, it talks about the higher you go, the lower you can reach down to serve, basically.
Yeah. Huh. You can agree to reincarnate to help humanity,
which is also in the Book of Owaspy as well.
The higher you go, the reason why the higher you go, the more you can serve, is because the higher you go, the more you realize your personal will is irrelevant and it's an illusion.
Right.
So therefore, you can be selfless because there's no self to be selfish for anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. This is great. I'm really trying to understand this Brahmanism book. This is helping.
Right, Brahman. There's a perfect saying in Buddhism. It says the world is unreal. Only Brahman exists. The world is Brahman. Those are the 3 steps of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I mean, all this Brahman is all this conscious being. There's nothing else to reality. Everything else is just a measurement that's been programmed into us through education, society, and whatever else.
Yeah.
We are measuring our relationship to the physical world. By measuring the relationship to the physical world, we are using consciousness. We are using consciousness because the reality of the world is consciousness.
Yep.
That's exactly what those 3 things that he just mentioned are. That God, that the reality of the world is God. God is consciousness. So I'm just replacing the word God with consciousness.
Right.
And that's all that those 3 things are. And so we live in a state of illusion. We live in Maya because people believe that the measurements that we are of in this world are reality, but the reality is it's not.
The word matter, our word matter comes from the Sanskrit word matra, which translates into Maya, which Maya means illusion.
Illusion.
This is you just have to do the research. You just have to. I mean, it's out there. It's just that our society and, like I said, our these Abrahamic faiths and just our Aristotelian logic and causality-based reasoning has gotten a lot of people to believe that they're the measurement of reality rather than reality itself. And it's a very subtle trick that's been going on for such a long time, and the deception runs very deep.
Yeah, and it's so hard to dig yourself out of it by yourself.
It is.
Like, how do you know you're even in a place that needs to be dug out from?
Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Right. The measure of
because so many people are telling you that there's nothing to dig out from, because you are not being told that you are God. You're not being told that you are God. You're being told that you are something other than that. And the fact of the matter is, if you realize that you are God, then you realize that you are part of the stream of consciousness that is Source, and that's the actual lack of illusion. That reality is the. But when you're told that you are not, and you are separate from, and that you are born sick, and you are born imperfect, that's part of the illusion that you're having to dig yourself out of.
Yes,
Yeah.
your religions and your parents and your teachers all criticize you, tell you you're worthless, you're not worthy, get on your knees, bow, all that nonsense. It's a subtle way to take what you think you are and to say, well, I'm worthless. Like, what am I? Like, I'm nothing. And even if you watch television, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get you, hey, you're not pretty enough. Buy this, buy this, buy that. Like, it's just reinforcing the personal self, which is the illusion.
Yeah.
Very true.
Um, so last week I had a really interesting sort of profound experience, and I'm actually trying to get back to it. You ever have something that is so real, and then you try and get it again, and it's like hard. It's just slipping. The more you try, the slipperier it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
So
because
Like
it's
the
not
sand in the
something
idea,
fingers.
because it's not something to acquire. So just one thing really quick. If you're trying to get back to an enlightened experience or something like that, it's not something that you strive to get to. It's a reduction. It's always a reduction. It's never something added. You're never adding to. It's always taking away something.
okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so here's the experience. The idea that I am not this body, and I am not this mind, and I'm not these emotions, and I'm just piloting a vessel, right?
Hmm.
I really embodied that, and it was so effortless. I mean,
Yep.
I just imagined myself with VR glasses, and everything in this world was just VR, and
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, I had control over what I ate. I could make myself fall asleep. I just would say to my body and my mind and everything, like, okay, I'm in charge, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to go to sleep now, and your mind will be quiet, and um, you don't need to eat a large amount. You don't need to eat more than once a day because I'm the captain, and I know that this vessel doesn't need that much food, and all of these different things all came together like perfectly, and for a week, almost a week, I was feeling like I was literally captaining a vessel, and this whole reality was just being played out in like a third person, and I
In
had
front of you.
so much control over the world I was in, my body,
Mm.
my mind, my emotions. Like I would tell myself, now look, just wait. You want to talk, but I would be coaching myself. I would be coaching the mind and the body and the emotions. Just maintain, be level. Wait for the point to be made, and then think about it. Just coaching, and everything was like awesome. and then
Yeah.
and then somehow I woke up and it was gone. Like trying to get back to that, I was like, oh man.
Yeah. You
So
got a
me
taste.
and Vince have actually talked about this very thing. We were in a room the other day and we were talking about this and how during meditation how we're kind of able to kind of step back from ourselves and watch our thoughts pass in front of us as if it was kind of like we're watching a movie, right? How and how at that point, because you're not in the illusion of the movie, because we all know that the movie that we watch is an illusion, it's something that somebody created, right? It's a maya.
Right.
And so if you're standing back and you're watching it rather than being in it, that as you are sitting back and watching it, it's like you're sitting in a director's chair. You
Yeah.
become the director, not the actor. You become the director of your movie. And so that's what you were. You were allowed to kind of direct things. And so um, again, what Vince had said about not not trying to reach for something, but just sit where you are and take take the reins from where you're at rather than trying to reach for it, right? And I think that's a key point. Is you you got up from your director's chair just long enough. I don't know if it happened during a dream state or whatever. Maybe you were dreaming about something that puts you back in a state of illusion, a state of Maya, and so you kind of got out of your director's chair for just a little bit. So at that point, really, I think the best way to establish that rather than reaching for it is just sit and meditate. Just try and just sit and meditate. Don't try too hard to reestablish that by reaching, because that in essence is an ego, trying to use your ego to reestablish something that is the very lack thereof, right? And
Listen,
you can't do that.
listen, enlightenment is the most obvious, most simplistic thing. When you have it, you're like, I can't believe I overlooked the most obvious thing in existence.
Hmm.
It is always the case. It's just our thoughts about existence is what obfuscates it.
Well, yeah, I can see the truth in that.
Just like the movie. So I'll go to the movie analogy. That's a really good. I've heard of Vita Vedantists use this as well. So can you separate? You can't separate the movie from which the screen that it's played on. Some people think that they're the movie all the time. That's the monkey mind, right? Some people just think they're just the movie. They're a character in the movie, and they whatever thought comes into their head, they believe they're identical to the thoughts. But then they say, wait a minute, I'm the screen for which the movie is played on. But then they come back to reality. This is the final step of enlightenment, and they're like, wait, there's nothing but the movie. It's the screen and the movie are one and the same. That's enlightenment.
Interesting. Well, keep going. Every day you got to keep going on the journey.
Yeah, Taoism or Taoism is very helpful. I think it's very beneficial if you're ever into that.
All right.
Brian was talking about Wu Wei or the middle path earlier. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, I'm gonna end the live. I really glad to meet you, Vincent. Nice to talk with you. And Brian and Saul had to leave.
Oh, I didn't know he
Yeah,
left.
Saul has an appointment and I'm going to go listen to his thing. It's some guy named Wings is going to give him some research information on how to do research properly, and I'm going to go listen to it
What, here on TikTok?
Yeah, they're going to do it on TikTok, but it's going to be like where they're not going to have guests. They're just going or people boxing up, but they're going to be just kind of in dual screen. And so I'm going to go listen to them because Wings does. That's what Wings does for a living. He teaches like scholarly or collegiate based research type stuff.
I'll follow you in there. That's cool. All right.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
All right. Nice meeting you, brother. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
All
right. You guys have a good day.
You too.
All right. Bye.